Welcome, everybody. We are super excited that you're here. We are super excited for our guest today. I think it's going to be sometimes I need to touch my computer. Okay. I think it's going to be a great conversation with our guest, Henny. She's amazing. She's a speaker, she's an author, she's a writer. She holds a BS in psychology from Missouri State and you're still currently pursuing your Master of Divinity, right?
My Master of Divinity.
Yeah, that's all just a little thing.
It's done, yes.
Yeah, with an emphasis on race, cultural identity, and reconciliation. And Allie has her own platform that she's been very vocal on, and I know a lot of you here probably follow her over there. And Allie, what I want to do is, for those of you who aren't familiar, can you share a little bit about yourself and what you're up to in the world?
Yeah. So there's a lot. Let's see. So I have 2 kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. She'll be 7 here in a week or so. So you might see my 4-year-old show up randomly during this. She's supposed to be downstairs watching Octonauts, but we'll see what happens. I also have a puppy, a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel puppy. So again, she might also make an appearance.
Perfect. Casual living room conversation. That's what we're going for with this. So.
We will just have to see.
We are all good. That's what we like about this.
I have been married for, I guess it'll be 16 years in June. My partner and I met in high school. We got married our freshman year, or after our freshman year of college. We lived in a few different places. A native Missourian, lived outside of Washington, D.C. for a while, and now I call Chicago home. We moved to Chicago last year during the pandemic. But it's been really what I've been able to see of Chicago. I love. It's great. I really like it here. Outside of kind of my that's, I always feel like, share like the family kind of personal.
Yeah.
People can get to know me. But outside of that, writer, speaker. I am a vice president of a faith-based nonprofit. I also am not currently ministering in a church, but that is where a lot of my work, life, whatever kind of experience has been. I've served as in various pastoral capacities in some different churches, and hopefully one day I will be able to be ordained as a priest in the Episcopal Church. And so that's my background. That's sort of my frame. Because I'm also a theologian, even though I don't feel like I really have done. It's like you get this degree, pay all this money to get a degree. I think I've done maybe like 2 things that I've been like, hey, yeah, theologian stuff. And that's been it. That's actually something that I hope to get back on. Because again, it's like, you spend all this time in school and whatever. It's like, not going to use my degree. I did the same thing with psychology. It's like, I got my degree in psychology and it was like, oh, hey, I'm going to go to the ministry. And so anyway, I could probably say more, but I'll leave it there.
Oh, that's awesome. Perfect.
And when in June is your anniversary? The most important question.
Oh, yes, June 18th.
Ooh, that's the day before ours.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Juneteenth.
yeah. You all were Juneteenth. Juneteenth was a Sunday, the year that I got married. So that doesn't quite work out. But sometimes our anniversary is on Father's Day, which gets interesting. But yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah.
I think ours was that year.
It was on Friday.
But on Father's Day weekend.
Yeah.
Friday. Awesome. Well, we have a lot of people joining us, and they're very excited. Someone else's son also likes Octonauts. Just so you know, our nephew also loves Octonauts. My sister.
Yeah, Octonauts, like that Creature Report song slaps. Like I love that creature. Like that comes on, I'm like, okay, yeah, I like it. And that's one of the ones that I like. That's one of the shows my kids like that I'm like, that doesn't get on my nerve. I like it.
Yeah, my sister seems to be encouraging the Octonauts, so it must be, I have not yet seen the Octonauts, but I have a feeling when COVID breaks and we can talk about
I know.
Yeah, amazing. Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. We're super excited you're here. Other people are super excited, so let's do this.
Yeah.
Welcome to our living room.
Yeah,
Kitchen,
absolutely.
dining room, office, and great room.
And just so you know, for anybody who is joining us live and you have questions, feel free to type them in, and we will get to them as we can. And so where I wanted to start this conversation off is really about the intersection of faith and religion and racism, right? And as somebody who's studied this, can you give us, just like for people who have like no context, right? Just like a kind of like a brief overview of where you see the intersection of racism and faith, and especially like in a historical context and as it is manifested today, and just like real quick.
Yeah, that is a big question. First of all, I think that it is twofold. The relationship there is twofold. So on the one end, you have where white people have used religion to propagate racism. On the other end of it, you have where Black people specifically, but then also other marginalized and oppressed groups have used, I'm speaking specifically about Christianity, but have used Christianity, have used the teachings, the narratives in the Bible for their liberation. And so the intersection there is, again, people who have the people in power who have used the religion, who have used their religion, the dominant religion in our country, as a means to oppress people and as justification for oppressing people, versus the people who look at those same religious texts, look at those same religious practices, and see, and they're able to reclaim them, they're able to reshape them, they're able to look at them through a different lens and see tools that help them for their liberation.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I was just thinking about how it's so interesting, because one of the things that we talk about and teach in the Exponential Human Project is all about that filter and how you see the world. And it's just so interesting to have Christianity through various filters, through various eyes, and being applied just totally. It's really interesting. So.
Well, what I think is fascinating is that somebody like I didn't like grow up like big in the church, but my grandparents were big in the church, right? And like my grandfather was a deacon, and
Your dad said?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. Learn something new every day. And I remember going to church in like being real little, and so it was Baptist church. And coming home and just being like pissed. Like, I was just like pissed, right? Because I was like, because even at a young age, I was like, why can't like God be depicted as a woman, right? And it's always like in the masculine. And I was like, I think like the pastor had come over to our house, and I was like, I went in, and I was like,
I've heard this story.
4 or 5 years old, and my whole family was like, and I was like, because you're little, you don't care. But what's interesting, I think, about that is not even like that specific conversation, but just how there's like these constraints, right? And depending on who is like kind of doing the talking, right? You can see the like, especially Christianity, you can see a religion as something that is used for liberation, right? And something that is used to like further oppress, right? And like put on these boundaries and these barriers on who people are allowed to be and what we're allowed to do. And so in terms of like, before we got on this call, we were getting into like this really interesting conversation about how
Always happens.
I know it does happen.
It always happens. We're like, wait, pause. We should go live.
About how how the conversation that's happening within the Black community in the church, right? How that conversation has gone one way, and how really like white religion and Christianity by white people are separate. And I'd love to bring that and get us on like like go into that deeper, because I feel like it's true, right? Like I'm curious because like when I think of church, it's different than when like Molly thinks of church, right? And yeah, so please say more. Let's go back.
Yeah. So first of all, I will start out by saying that, there are conversations that need to take place within the Black community that then also need to take place within the Black church about historically the treatment of women in those spaces. And you hit on that a little bit. But also the treatment of queer people in those spaces, the treatment of disabled folks in those places, fat phobia, all that type of stuff. Those are discussions that are inside discussions for the Black community. But there are different intersections, there's different things. It's not categorically that Black Christianity is homophobic, that Black Christianity is queerphobic, fatphobic, ableist. That's not true. But I would definitely say that historically that has been the broad trajectory. And so the Black community, Black Christians, we need to have these conversations, and we need to dismantle those things within our own communities, within our own faith communities and that type of stuff. But with that said, the Black church, the institution of the Black church, has been a fixture in the Black community for a very long time. And a lot of people talk about, now how the Black community, the Black church isn't necessarily as visible in the current civil rights movement that we're in. But there are a lot of people who are people of faith who are leading movements, who are leading things within our current movement. It's just that it's not, because again, we understand that sometimes the Black church can be a place of harm, can be a place of triggering for other Black people. But there are Black activists who are still using the tools that they get from our religious texts, from our religious practices, and implementing those things, those ideas into their practices. They're just not calling that. And it's not like a weird, like, ooh, we're going to try to backdoor convert you and that type of stuff. Because what's interesting about that too, I talk about the backdoor conversion, and the reason why I bring that up is because white Christianity is different. Black Christianity is embodied. Black Christianity is about there's no difference between feeding the poor and being involved in activism, and there's not such an easy separation between what is considered sacred and secular. And so the Black church fits nicely within these types of things. And we don't always feel the need to have to try to give a speech to get people saved and to do all this other type of stuff. It's just the Black church, the Black community is more about belonging, and is more about you claiming that community and that community claiming you. Now, white religion, on the other hand, and this is where I think a lot of people who are, because again, Black people who have issues with Christianity, that's a whole other different conversation that needs to be had within the Black community. But the conversation I think that we can have today is, a lot of times white people see religion and they put it all in the same box. They say Christianity. I'll say Christianity and religion, acknowledging that there are other religions, whatever, but I'm saying religion's easier to say than Christianity sometimes, every single time. So by shorthand, know that if I'm saying Christianity, or if I'm saying religion, I'm also saying Christianity, implying Christianity there, and I'll try to specify as otherwise. But a lot of times white people hear Christianity, they hear religion, and they automatically think of the colonizing, oppressive white church. And they try to apply those same categories to an institution to which those categories don't apply. And the reason why those categories don't apply is that white religion categorically throughout history, almost categorically throughout history, has been about dominance and oppression and imperialism and colonization. It's been about supporting the status quo. Right? Yeah. Black religion is not that. Black religion is the religion of the marginalized, of the oppressed. Now, yes, we share religious texts. We share some religious practices. but how we interpret those texts and how we understand those texts, how we understand those practices are almost categorically different. And so whenever you have slaves on the plantation, not all slaves were Christians. In fact, some practiced Islam, some converted from Islam to Christianity, some mixed their religious practices that they either inherited or brought over from Africa with them with Christianity. Some people were completely atheistic. Those are dynamics that are all important to acknowledge, and that existed in the Black community during slavery up until now. We still have those same dynamics. It's just that the Black Christians have been the ones, the language of freedom, the language of liberation has largely been informed by Black Christianity. And so there are whole branches of theology, even whole disciplines of theology that are rooted in the idea of liberation from oppression. There are whole theologies. I say theology, there's multiple ways of people looking at particularly the Christian religious text and seeing, how does this text speak to people's liberation? How do these texts speak against racism? So white folks hear, so the important distinction I think that we have to make here is that white folks sometimes hear Christianity, they hear religion, and they have a whole other different schema, a whole other different set of ideas in their brain about what religion is and about what Christianity is. And people think, okay, well, Christian, it must mean the fundamentalist people at Westboro Baptist Church who are holding up signs that say terrible things about the LGBTQ community. They think about the white evangelical Trump-loving Christians that must be that Christianity, or they think of the televangelists who do all sorts of whatever. And yeah, there are some black televangelists for sure, but they think about that type of Christianity, or maybe they think of the Catholic Church. They think of the white Catholic Church because there are Black Catholics, there are Black and brown Catholics. Actually, most Catholics in the world are actually brown, have brown skin. But they think of white Catholicism. They think of Roman or Irish or Italian or German or French Catholicism based on, whatever ethnic group, whatever churches you might have interacted with were founded by. And so that's the religion that white people often think of, the Christianity that white people often think of. And so then I think that people who inhabit an activist space automatically will discount Christianity.
Yeah.
Now, I want to be careful whenever I say this, because I'm not saying this like as activists, as people of goodwill, as whatever, that you have to convert to Christianity. That's not what I'm not saying to be an anti-racist, that you have to convert to Christianity. Not at all. I'm not even saying that you have to read a word of scripture or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to do here. But what I want for people to understand here is how religion, how Christianity informs people like me, and informs other people who are Christians and who are activists and who read the Holy Scriptures, read the Holy Bible, and they see the tools to dismantle oppression. Now, with all that said, yeah, I can't sit as a Christian, because Christianity is responsible for a lot of BS in this world, okay? Like, for a lot of colonization, for a lot of pain, for a lot of hurt, for a lot of harm. Mm-hmm. And I can't say, well, you know what, I'm not one of those types of Christians. Not it. And not lay claim to that and not say.
Take responsibility for it, right? Like, and like, I just want to put in here, as somebody who's not decidedly Christian, I also have that listening of Christianity, right? I see it as somebody who has felt very much outside of the church because of my, the Black church, because of my sexuality, then I'm like, okay, so the Black church ain't it, right? They don't like me. And then Christianity, which is like in my mind has that I have a listening of it as like, you know, like you were talking about, like this very colonizing
And judgmental.
yeah, judgmental, only one way, this way, place, and it doesn't work, right? And so I really appreciate you bringing this up and like bringing what it is for you, because really what we're doing here, I think, is we're bringing possibility to this conversation, right? And we're opening the box, so to speak. And I just want to say, for anybody who is on here listening, like if you're feeling like a little like discomfort or a little like, you know, stick with us, stay here, stay in it. So yeah, please keep going. I think that.
And so, you know, it's I think that all of that is, all those feelings are valid. And as a Christian, I have to hold those feelings. I have to say, you know, I can't say, oh, not me. That's not me. That's not my faith. That's not whatever. It's not. But there's an element, definitely, there's an element of Christian privilege that my religious holidays, people get off school, people get off work, people get off whatever for my religious holiday. So I want to acknowledge the privilege. I want to acknowledge certain things that come with holding a Christian identity, with holding that as my faith, and participating in I won't say participating in Christianity, but participating in a culture where Christianity has been placed in the center, and recognizing that is often an oppressive place for a lot of people. I will say for a lot of people. But I think that whenever we start talking about, you know, the different listenings, the different ways that we see and understand Christianity, I will say this. I think that Christianity, that the true, I won't even say Christianity. I think that the teachings of Jesus Christ, that are contained within what is understood to be Scripture, what has been understood to be Scripture for the past 2,000 years by people who have followed, because it wasn't even called Christianity back then. It was called the Way. People way back in the times, it was in the times whenever people were first coming into this faith, it was called the Way. That was what people called it. When it wasn't like the word Christian that appears in the Bible, and it was a pejorative term. It was, oh, they were first called Christians at Antioch, I believe it was, and it was like, oh, this is like ooh, that's like oh, they're being mean, like they're calling this what word that translates to Christian. But these understandings, the Christianity did not start out as a religion of oppressors. It started out as a group of people who had been marginalized. It started out as a group of people who were outcast. Now, unfortunately, what happened in the 5th century or so, 4th or 5th century, is it became the religion of the empire. And so you had a leader, Constantine, who wasn't actually a Christian. He was buried in like Christian robes or whatever. I think he did have like a deathbed conversion or something like that to Christianity, but he was pagan. But he saw that, you know, hey, the Christians, they made it for a really good political group of people who could help keep him in power. And so he did a lot of stuff that pleased Christians, and so then Christianity started to grow within the Roman Empire. That doesn't sound like anything that's happened in the last 5 years or so. Yeah. But I say all that to say that the lens with which a lot of queer people, there are a lot of queer people that are Christians and that have to contend in the same way that I do as a Black woman, that have to contend with, hey, there's all these things that people have done, but a lot of that stuff has been done by people in power, where we read it and we say, where we look at the tradition, we look at that stuff and we look and say, hold on a second. You can't go very far in the Old Testament or the New Testament of the Bible without running into a verse about justice. and running into a verse about how the person that we celebrate, that we try to emulate in some ways, how God cares about justice. And I think that even for people who maybe are atheistic, some of the ethics of Jesus, there are whole courses that you can take in colleges that are the ethics of Jesus Christ. Again, you don't have to convert to Christianity, but there are things, there are specific things like care for your neighbor. Like one of the second greatest commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. That was something, I'm sure that that there may be other thinkers who have said something very similar, but Christianity also has that. That was a teaching of Christ, where you care about the person, you care about other people as much as you care about yourself. There,
sick as a stranger, right?
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
It is really interesting because I think that obviously also that simple knowing, that simple embodying that, right? Just loving others as you love yourself, like seeing no stranger. It's like, it's actually probably in some variation in most religions.
Yes.
Yet you would think that somehow it could be like, oh, hey, we all have this. So can we just all, like this one thing, can we just all, and it's just, and it really is, it is the thing that will make the difference when we actually care for others as we care for ourselves.
And something that's really interesting that Christ also said, in addition to love your neighbor as you love yourself, he said that the law and the prophets hang on the first commandment, the first great commandment was love God, and the second one was love other people. And he said the entirety of the law and the prophets hang on these things. So what that means, so let me interpret that for you if you don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
What that means is, whenever we talk about the law, he's talking about the 10 commandments. He's talking about the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy in the Bible. He's talking about all those clobber verses that people pull out and say, well, I shall not sleep with man as with mankind, and blah, 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 blah. All those things, all those verses that people take way sorely out of context and use them and weaponize them against other people.
Yeah.
All those things, Jesus was saying, you know what, like, keep this, do this thing.
You can't do this.
All that other stuff. People didn't in the Bible times didn't even really do a lot of that stuff. There are debates. Theologians, we debate on what actually was the purpose of the book of Leviticus and what the purpose was of some of those verses. And there are a lot of us that think that it was actually kind of like, hey, not necessarily trolling, but was more just kind of like, hey, we're showing you these things here. We're saying these things here, but we actually understand them to be completely different. So you have people in modern times interpreting a text, reading a text in English that wasn't the original language that the text was written in, out of completely divorced from the context in which it was written, and trying to tell people how to live their lives based on a plain text reading of that without the context. But that's a whole other different story here. But the teachings of Christ tell us that the law and then the prophets, the things that the people who were of the Jewish faith at that time, they put a lot of stock into what their prophets had to say, and because that was, for them, that was the word of God. And so Christ was saying these two things, the law and the prophets, basically everything that they said, it comes down to loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. And so again, like you said, there are lots of other religions that have something very, very, very similar to that, if not word for word, very, very, very similar to that. And so when we start talking about racism, when we start talking about justice just in general, for me, that's what informs me as an activist, saying, hold on a second, people are not treating me the way that they're treating themselves. They're not loving me as they're loving themselves. I live in Chicago. I'm looking at the north side of Chicago where people live. Something as simple. I do a bike share here in Chicago, and there are not as many bikes down here on the south side as there are up north. There's more people down here. There's more people who probably need to ride bikes down here. Not as many available for the share. So I look at that. I look to the north side of Chicago. I look up to Wrigleyville. I look to the South Loop. I look to all these places, and I'm like, hold on a second. Y'all aren't loving y'all neighbors on the south side like you love yourself. I look at all these Trump Republicans, all these people, and I say, you know what? I look at the richest, 1%, and I say, you bought another house, another boat, another car, another whatever. You're not taking care. There are people who literally have nothing and just have the clothes on their back, if even that much. And you're not loving them the same way. You're not taking care of them the same way that you're taking care of yourself, and that's a problem. I see racism as a failure for people to see that other people inherently have value, regardless of who they are. Each person has an inherent sense of worth and an inherent sense of value. And so there are people that act in ways that are not consummate with that value. And so as a community, we have to help people, racists, homophobes, queerphobic people, so they're not queer people, queerphobic people. We have to treat them, we have to help them to be able to recognize that they do some things, they have intrinsic value, but they do some things that hurt some people, and help them to recognize that, the way that you're acting, that's harmful. So like, you have value as a person, but the way that you're treating other people is not bespeaking the value in yourself, number one, but also isn't bespeaking the value in other people. So let's change it. And that's what justice is. I really believe that justice, it helps us to recognize the worth in other people, but it also helps us to recognize our own worth. And because whenever we recognize our own worth and we love ourselves, we love ourselves enough not to let other people also be going through some of the same things that we've been going through. It's like, as a Black woman, I love myself enough I don't stand for oppression. I love myself enough to know, what, if I'm experiencing oppression, then my queer siblings are experiencing oppression also. And so why on earth would I want somebody to experience the same levels of dehumanization, the same levels of oppression, the same levels of things as me? Why would I want that for somebody else? That doesn't make sense. My sense of ethics says, like, hold on a second. If I'm suffering and there are other people who are suffering, how about we all don't suffer? How about we all get to flourish? And how about we all get and we get rid of the things that keep people from flourishing? This isn't about, for me, this is bigger than Democrats and Republicans. This is bigger than other things. This is about flourishing. This is about everybody having the opportunity to flourish and to live the best life that they can. And so whatever that looks like, and we get rid of the stuff that isn't serving people, the stuff that's harming people. Or if we can't, and this brings us back to Christianity, if we can't get rid of the things that, I mean, yes, we could get rid of Christianity and say, okay, we're not gonna have this religion anymore. But if we're not, but if people see there's something that's valuable within that, let's redeem the value in something and let's look at it and say, you know what? Okay, this thing was really bad. So let's make it into something good. So there's actually a scripture that talks about beating swords into plowshares. And what that means is, instead of taking the instrument, is they'll beat swords into plowshare and they'll study war no more. So that's in the scripture, that's in the book of Isaiah. And there's this idea that the metal, the tools that were used to harm people, we're going to take the metal that's in that sword is the same as the same metal that's in that scythe, that's in that plowshare. But we're just going to take it and reshape it. And so go ahead.
I really like that, and I want
a ton of questions.
We have a ton of questions, and like there's just a couple things that I really want to hit on that you mentioned, because there's a lot there. Like, so one, we're talking about humanity, and like this cancel culture, I think is really like, it doesn't really work, because I think what tends to happen is like we conflate somebody's actions with their humanity and make that who they are. And instead of saying like, okay, no, you as a person are whole and complete and valuable, but your actions aren't in alignment with that, right? So that, like, I love that. And then also
your actions, right? Because both are true. So as soon as you say but, it's like,
right.
It's like, but cancel all that stuff and your actions.
Yeah.
It's like, because both are true.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing, right? It's like.
And what was the last thing you said? Oh, I love the sword and the scythe, right? Because really what that is, all that is, it's a miracle, right? It's a miracle, because a miracle is simply a change in perspective, right? And so you shift the context, right? And I think that's what's really powerful here, because, you know, there is a context in which, or perspective in which Christianity is colonialist and harmful and oppressive. And then you shift the context, right? You shift the perspective from people who are oppressed, and it's really, the way, right? It really is a pathway to liberation. And it's not just liberation for Black people, right? I think like that's the thing, right? It's liberation for everybody, because even if you are a part of the oppressing, you are not free, because you cannot be oppressing other people and be free. And I just think that, like, and just like really just like, and it's a shift, right? It's like a little just like, oh, let me look at it from here, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute. The way I've been seeing it, I'm just like, I'm not getting it all. But if I look at it like this, and it's all there, right? It's the same Christianity. It's all there. It becomes something much more powerful. It becomes a community, a thing that builds community. It goes from the sword to the scythe. And I love that. And what I want to do is I want to get to some questions.
I keep looking over here, because we have about 50 people joining us. So hi, all 50 people.
Hi everyone. Hi 50 people.
And there will be a lot more in the replay, because obviously this is midday. Up there's my mom. Hi mom. Okay. All right. Melissa says, I recently took part in a Be the Bridge course at my church. I found it difficult, but didn't want to critique it since it was authored by a Black female. I identify as white and would love to know your thoughts. My issue was with the reconciliation piece. How can there be reconciliation if the harm continues? It seems that Black and brown folks are expected to continue to give based on biblical teaching. Is this doing more harm? Have you heard of this book and workshop, and do you believe it to be beneficial to anti-racism as a whole? So
I am quite familiar with Be the Bridge. Latasha, I would consider Latasha to be a colleague of mine in a way. I've not done a lot with her. I'm part of the Be the Bridge group on Facebook and some of the other spaces. Hopefully I'll be able to answer every aspect of her question. If I leave something out, please let me know. So something that I would say, I'm not sure, first of all, what edition of the Be the Bridge curriculum that you have participated in or whatever, because this is actually a critique that a lot of people have had of Be the Bridge. And I know that they have done some things to revise, they've revised some of their curriculum. They have also they've also added some different discussions of like whiteness and some different things in with that. I'm not overly familiar because it's been several years. I want to say that I think that the last curriculum that I read, I think was the first edition, but I feel like that there's like at least a second or a third edition out there at this time. I know. So anyway, I know a little bit of Tasha's ethos and whatever, and so I would say that I personally do not operate from the place of reconciliation, of the idea, because I think that the question even hit on this is like, how can you reconcile something? How can you reconciliate something that isn't conciliatory to begin with? And so I think that there definitely are, as with anything, there are going to be points of critique. There's not going to be things that are 100%. And as activists, I think that we can get really chase ideological purity rather than looking at, okay, what is the whole, what is looking at it holistically, rather than saying, well, this one little part of it isn't ideologically pure, let me just like yeet the rest of it in the trash can. And that's not necessarily what we want to do. So I would say that I think that and this is something, and these are things that I've said in that I say them publicly here because I've said them otherwise in spaces that Tasha's part of, that I think that Be the Bridge sometimes relies a lot on emotional labor from Black people. And so I think that it can be harmful to people if they are not prepared to be in that space. But I do think that there is a space. I see Be the Bridge. I see any type of curriculum or anything that focuses on that reconciliation piece. I see that as an entry point for white people, because what I just said about, stuff being conciliatory and whatever, there are some people who are going to hear that and they're going to immediately leave the room because they aren't ready to hear that message. Yeah. But they can hear, their hearts aren't prepared to hear the message of, yeah, actually, stuff like you can't fix something that you can't expect me to fix something that you broke. What kind of slavery is that? Like, my people fix stuff that your people broke. We did that for like 300 years. Like, we don't need to do it anymore. But this idea of reconciliation, I think some of it is also because it's a Christian space or whatever. For white Christians, language is very important. And so I think that saying, not that language isn't important to Black people, but the way that white people want to use language, they don't like certain language. And if certain language makes them feel uncomfortable, then they won't even do it. So I won't say, oh yeah, well, Natasha, like, she's out here trying to subvert, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to put all that on her. But what I will say is that I think that I think that there is a little bit of intentionality behind the language of reconciliation. And I think that it's to get people to start to be able to start the conversation within those spaces.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
So that's awesome. Yeah. And I'm so glad that you are familiar with that work. Okay. So, all right. Someone just shared, I was brought up Buddhist, but in close proximity to white Christianity. And this conversation is opening up my eyes to another religious reality within Christianity. Listen, that's all we do here. We just open up your eyes to another thing. There are things in our blind spots. We all have pockets of ignorance when it comes to anything, and we walk around judging things as if we're some expert on it. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because we're human. Okay. Somebody here says, often Christian faiths are not open to women as leaders. Some are also dragging their feet on actively having leaders of color. How has this intersection played out in your journey to faith and the process of earning your doctorate? Are you working on your doctorate or your master's?
Not yet. I just finished my master's. I'm not working on my doctorate yet.
Okay, cool. So we'll say a degree. I was like, oh, okay, that's going to be a long road, but good luck to you. Do you find more barriers when dealing with any specific faith community leaders or ethnic groups? What specific faith-based spaces have you found most affirming of all aspects of your identity?
Yeah, so that's a wonderful question. So I would say that I have typically been, because I've been in ministry, I've pastored, whatever. I have typically been in contexts where that I can be affirmed in that respect. So I have not been I refuse to be in contexts where the fullness of who I am cannot be appreciated. And I've extended my ethics to include where other people can't be the fullness of who they are, particularly our queer siblings. And so for me right now, I'm in the Episcopal Church. The Episcopal Church isn't perfect, but they ordain women. They ordain queer people. They have an open and inclusive policy. That doesn't always play out in every congregation the same way, but that is what that's what the law of the land is, at least in that organization. And there are a lot of organizations that there are a lot of church organizations that are like that. And if the church organization isn't like that, then there are individual congregations that are like that. So I have had I certainly have had experiences with racism, and I've had experiences with sexism and with patriarchy, even in spaces that would claim to be egalitarian or whatever. That's the way it is. Where there are men, where there are cisgender men, there's often going to be patriarchal ideas. Where there are white people, there's often going to be white supremacy. And for that matter, I mean, where there's Black people, where there's cis women, there's often going to be patriarchy and white supremacy. And so we all have to go through a process of actively getting rid of the internalized junk that's within us, but also divesting from those things. So I certainly it's not been I guess I'll say it this way, that I've been in spaces, and I've intentionally put myself in spaces that I know will affirm the fullness of what I believe my calling and my identity and stuff is. And I've tried to avoid places that aren't, and in places where they claim one thing but then go about it a different way. I've been there to challenge and to say, no, actually, you said that I did that at my seminary. It's like, hey, y'all are saying that y'all want women and y'all want people of color here, and you want us in leadership. So I've been that person. But again, and this is something, a tension point with the Black church, where sometimes women aren't always affirmed in ministry, or there's ceilings and stuff to where they are. And so we constantly have to be forming and reforming the spaces that we're in.
Awesome. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Megan says, very frustrated Catholic here, having a hard time with the church, especially the Pope's recent comments on not blessing LGBTQ marriages, among many other things. I believe in a God of love and loving our neighbors. The church has lost me, though, for exactly what Allie is saying. Yeah, I got it. All right. This is what I feel my religion is, taking care of our community and those in it to help lift us all up. Beautiful. All right.
I almost feel like there's been, and maybe it's just like my sense, like there's just been this like, almost like perversion. Well, you spoke to this earlier, of like what religion is, especially Christianity, right? Because it's the dominant religion. And like, and maybe it's just me and my idealism, and I don't care, but I do feel like that there is this idea, or this like kind of movement to kind of come back to, or maybe even recreate the essence of what,
like the love thy neighbor.
Yeah, like
level.
Christianity and Islam is, because if you really look at it, it doesn't work, right? Like, good or bad, right or wrong, we move that out of the way, it's not working, right? Like, look at the results we have in the world, and look at like what is actually happening, and like what people are like made to think about who they are, even though like how they are just born or how they choose to express themselves are made so wrong by this perversion of religion, that like people like go to extremes to like contort themselves to fit into this box.
Yeah.
And you just can't do it anymore, right? Like, I feel like if you just can't do it anymore. And I honestly think that this version, and again, maybe I'm being optimistic, of Christianity,
we have to be day in and
like
day out.
it's like it's on its way out, like it has to be, because it just does not work. I think it just limits the possibility of who we are as human beings, and like our expression of ourselves. And for like, that's one of the reasons like I am not a part of a church, right? Because it's like I feel like I don't fit in to like whatever box you're supposed to be in to be a part of it, And
I think that a lot of that, it comes down to power. And it comes down to, because I gave like a very, very brief, very simplistic church history lesson there, but I said, that Christianity had started as people who ended up being on the margins. It started out with as a community of people who decided to worship this person that they believed to be a Messiah, to be a chosen one. They worship that person, and throughout history, that movement started to grow. Well, as that movement started to grow, people started to leverage that movement for power. And they started to see, some even within the movement started to see, hey, well, what we need is power. And to be fair, some of that initial grasp for power was because of the persecution that was happening. So Christians had been persecuted for hundreds of years, had been burnt, had been killed, had been whatever. So initially, the grasp for equality, it was a grasp for equality. It was a grasp for we don't want to be oppressed anymore, so can you treat us like human beings? So that was cool. But then what ended up happening is that people started to get hungry for power. Once the oppression stopped, then they saw, we can start getting power. And so we can start using this religion as a way to get power. And so they started using it as a way to get power. And so that's what a lot of us in the West, Eastern Christianity, a lot of people don't realize that there's an Eastern Christianity and there's a Western Christianity, and those two things are different. Those things are different. And really, and I'll say this too, disclaimer, with any religion in any country, the dominant religion is almost always going to be oppressive. That is almost always going to be the thing that not always, but almost always, you see it in majority Muslim countries. You see it in any place where there is a dominant religion. It often can become a bad scene. The people, for whatever reason, people get religion and they behave badly. In our context, those who practice Islam are an oppressed group, but they aren't necessarily in other parts of the world. In other parts of the world, Christians are the oppressed group. So it's all, again, that different perspective. But whenever I talk about that aspect of power, unfortunately for us here in America, Christianity has been tied to power. And something that I want to help us discern here in just like for a minute is, whenever we talk about that category of white evangelicals, when we talk about the category of people who voted for Donald Trump, who've been okay with a lot of the things that have been happening, the people who are anti-abortion, the people who are anti-LGBT inclusion, those types of people, they view their Christianity as a tool for power. There are entire teachings, there are entire conferences, there are entire things where they talk about using their faith to get more power. They talk about using their faith to lobby politicians. They talk about using their faith to do this and that and the other. I don't know if that's revelatory for anyone or not, but what we see is faith married to the Christian faith married to power here.
Yeah.
But what we're saying, but what I'm saying, what I think that a lot of Christians are starting to recognize, if it's not inherently been a part of their faith as it has been for me, is that shit ain't sweet. Like, you can't have that. You can't have that and have what we understand to be the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't like what would Jesus do? Not this. And so I can see that. That's my interpretive lens. And so those are the tools that I use to dismantle oppression, and that those tools even extend to dismantling oppression within my own context, within my own faith community. That's not just like, okay, cool, hey, we're whatever, but we have to be dismantling these things Christians have to actively be dismantling these things within our own things. You know what? we don't need to have Christmas holiday break things. We don't need to do, I mean, I know that we all enjoy the holiday things and like whatever, but we don't need, if it means that it oppresses people who do not practice Christianity, then we need to rethink and reform that practice. You know what? I'll go as far as to say that I don't think that a Bible needs to be in every hotel room. Like, it's like, what? Why? There's no,
And it drives me nuts.
It is a really, I'm seeing it less and less though, I think.
I think so.
it's happening less, or it's less prominent. You can, a lot of times you can look around in a drawer and find one. There are other myriad ways. Those are low hanging fruits. You know what? I know a lot of Christian people who disown me, but I actually don't need our money or our Pledge of Allegiance, even though I think Pledge of Allegiance is stupid. Sorry, but we actually don't need those things to say God.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need for our money. Not everybody believes in the same God that I believe in. And if in God we trust, if somebody feels oppressed by that being on their money, if somebody feels oppressed by, well, we're going to have a prayer that's going to be to the Judeo-Christian God or whatever. If somebody's going to feel hurt, harmed, and oppressed by that, like, my religion, my faith in God is big enough to say, okay, well, you know what? Like, that's cool. Like, I don't have to pray in public. Oh my gosh. Like, Jesus said a lot about that. Like, I don't have to, like, there are things that we don't have to do, that we can. And I think that there are a lot of us that are trying to rethink and reform. With that said, there's a lot of Christianity, a lot of, things, a lot of biblical references and that type of stuff. That are kind of baked into our culture a little bit, and the different things that are kind of just baked into our culture that we say and do and don't even realize. Oh, wait a minute, you just quoted a verse there, or you just like quoted something or you just did a practice that's a Christian practice or whatever. So some of it, it's going to be harder to tease some of those things out. In the same way with white supremacy, there could be some things that can be harder to tease out. But for me, understanding, hey, I'm in the dominant group. As in terms of my faith, I'm in the dominant group. And if somebody on the margins says, if one of my siblings that's a Buddhist says, you know what, actually, I find it like really hella oppressive when Christians do this and that and the other. And it's like, okay, well, I don't have to do that in public.
Yeah. There's a couple of things here, and we have just a couple more minutes, but like some things I want to highlight. Like, one, I think when we're talking about power, right? I think it's like a misconception of power, right? Like, what is actually power? And to be able to be in your religion big enough, I really like that you said that, right? To have a religion that is big enough to understand, it's like, oh, like, it's not just about me, right? It can encompass you and all of you, to be like, I don't need to have this thing because you don't like, it doesn't jive with you. Like, that's big and that's powerful. And I think people, like, what's really happening is that we just have a small idea of power
and who we are and our own,
and what that means.
So
We have one question that I really want to make sure that we get to.
We have some, I know, friends. Allie's amazing. She's like, I think all of our heads have exploded a little bit with everything that you've had to share and teach in such a big, good way. But there was a question about, do you have any recommended books or other sources to help us learn more about how Christianity was warped into a tool of oppression in the antebellum era?
Ooh, that's a good question. So one book that covers the antebellum era, but then goes a little bit farther, is a book by a good friend of mine, actually, named Jamar Tisby. It's called The Color of Compromise. There is also, it deals a little bit more with modern stuff. There is also, I'm going to pull up my thing here so I can get the right, make sure that I get the right name of the book. There's a book called Slave Religion by Albert J. Rabbitoe. let's see, Slave Religion, The Invisible Institution is what that's called. That talks about religion in the antebellum era. I'm also going to recommend the book Sisters in the Wilderness by Dolores Williams. She hits on she's a womanist theologian. She hits a little bit on Christianity in slavery, but she gives a very female, Black female perspective of some of those things. Let me see. Those are the two books that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm so terrible I've read a lot of books. I'm terrible at like remembering what stuff are.
Put them in the description because I think people always appreciate.
Yeah. And even within, I know within slave religion, there are a lot of references and stuff that can lead you down a rabbit hole. Slave religion is like the book is probably like the book that deals, one of the main ones. Another book that I'm going to recommend that's on topic but not, it deals with racism, and it deals with, I think it does talk a little bit about the slavery era, but it goes through, is called Black Fire. It's talking specifically about the Pentecostal movement, which is really interesting. And that is by Australia Alexander. Those are all books that deal in some and in part with Black Christianity and with enslaved religion and with racism. So those all kind of hit those intersections in some ways, and those are good jumping off points, especially if you, I hate to recommend Amazon because Amazon's ethics kind of suck sometimes, but even if you just look at what some of those books and stuff are, some of the recommendeds, and then from wanting to know more of a theological perspective, I would also recommend Reading While Black by Esau McCaulley. I will say, because I have this book, Esau's a good friend of mine. I know some of his theology. I'm pretty sure in the book that he doesn't get into like queer theologies or theologies against queer people or anything like that. But I know that Esau's position tends to not be queer affirming. So I recommend that book. I don't think that there's anything that would be anti-LGBT in it, but knowing Esau's position, I would recommend that book with that caveat that there might be some things in it that could. I don't think that he's not that type of guy to intentionally like be like, oh, blah, but that he's not that type of guy at all. But I wouldn't want for somebody to run into something, me having recommended that book, and then run into something that could be whatever. So read it with your antenna up. But that's something that I think Reading While Black, I think it offers a good kind of a theological perspective of how Black people approach Christianity. And so
awesome.
Thank you
great.
so much.
We've got a bunch of the titles being put in the comments. This was a very fast hour.
I know, very fast, very
and it was
fast.
so great to learn so much from you and just get other perspectives. And I think one of our favorite things to do here is to bring people in who do just this. It's like we think we know about the thing, and then we see something that we didn't know about Christianity, or we didn't know about the Black church, or it's so great, and it is so amazing to meet you and get to spend time with you. And I know we have a lot of the same people in our groups, and so it's really
and if people want to find out more or follow you, where can they find you?
You can follow me on Facebook. It's just my name. I have a public writers page. Just look for my name. There's a picture of me that kind of has like a reddish, kind of pinkish background. You can also find me on Instagram at Allie Henny. You can find me on Twitter at my handle there is at the Armchair Com. And the Armchair Com is short for the Armchair Commentary. Back when I started this account, commentary was too long for a handle. Now I think I could probably fit it in there, but I just haven't. So the Armchair Com is short for the Armchair Commentary, which is my blog, which I don't post to nearly enough. But I do not post that blog nearly enough, but that's one place where you can find some of my material. I'm also on Patreon. I tend to do a lot more video and that type of stuff on Patreon than I do writing. I need to do some more writing if it's more writing up there. So you can find me on Patreon. Also, you can occasionally find some of my writings. If you're somebody who is interested in knowing more about kind of modern Black Christianity, I want to recommend the Witness Black Christian Collective to you. This is the organization that I'm VP of, and so I will say again, it's a collective of Black Christians so there's a lot of different perspectives, there's stuff that's there. Since I took over as VP, there's stuff that's there that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think that there's a lot of stuff that's also really, really good there too. And so that's something that if you want to know more, just kind of what are Black Christians, modern Black Christians thinking, that's a good place to go and to read and to learn. So yeah, and occasionally I think I might have an article up there right now, or you don't have to dig very long to find an article from me there. So.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
Thank
this
you
has
for
been
sharing everything.
amazing.
And
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
we'll probably have to have you come back at some point.
Yeah, I would love it. This was so great. This is wonderful.
Thank
So
you.
great.
And I hope your daughter enjoyed Octonauts. It seems
Yes,
like
I think she did. She was also playing music. I had to mute a few times because she was banging on a xylophone.
I
But I think that it was she was having a good time. So I think we're okay.
That's what matters. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Have a great day. It was so, so great to meet you. And we will be in touch for sure.
Wonderful.